Welcome to Zamora Woodworking. My name is Nick. Today I was going to go over some more tips and tricks for beginners. This is the second part of my series. Things that I found along the way that I screwed up, and hopefully you guys don't have to. If you follow these little tips, tricks, they'll help you out, get you going, and save you some heartache in the end, hopefully. If you could, like, share, and subscribe. For small channels like this, it means the absolute world. I thank you guys so much for almost getting us to 500, and once we do end up getting to 1,000, like I said in a previous video, I'm going to do a random giveaway to a random subscriber, all out of my money. Not sponsored, not affiliated, nothing else. One of these Jenny bits, I really do like them. I use them all the time for my nicer projects. So if you end up subscribing, you're automatically entered, and once we get up to 1,000, I'll randomly draw and somebody will get one of these sent to their door. Here we go. All right, so for my first part of the tips and tricks, I wanted to bring up digital calipers. I've noticed some guys on the forum, Facebook group, they don't have a pair of these. These are just amazing. They're super cheap. I think like 20 bucks you can get them on Amazon. I'll put one in the link in the description. With these calipers, they're super nice. I mean, with the tape measure, you can't get down to the fine resolution. This one here goes to 4 decimal places. What I didn't like to do with these is whenever I end up using them, you know, if I have my stock piece of material here, we'll just say that this is the material here. You can actually, if you look on the back side, there's a measurement right there. See on that to that. So make sure obviously it's zeroed out, it's on, and whatever units you want to use, I'm using inches here. So it's on inches, zeroed out, bring it out, back in, out, back in. Okay, it's still good. So if I had this material here and say I was going to put my probe on top, I would put this here, bring this on down, and it will give me that nice little readout right there. It'll give me that nice little readout right there of exactly how far it is, not guessing, not messing around or anything like that. You know, and then if you end up carving things on your CNC that are going to be functional in other areas and you need to put drill holes somewhere or take measurements for something you're making, these are invaluable to have for 20 bucks. Along with these, if you do buy a cheaper pair, one thing I will tell you is a lot of these are what they call parasitic. So even if you turn it off, it's still eating up a little bit of juice, and it's always caught me at the worst time ever. So if you look in here, these little things have batteries. You can see right in there. Have spares of those on hand. They all seem to be pretty universal what batteries they use. But have some of those on hand. If you don't want to have to worry about that, you can take this plate off. And then a lot of these cases, until in here, they got this little space to put a battery in. It usually comes with a spare. I'm already eating up the spare. And I've ordered extra because I think it was like 5 bucks for like 20 or so on Amazon. It was super cheap. I'll see if I can find the link to that too. But these are just invaluable. And then the other thing I like to do with these, which I hate to admit it, but metric is a hell of a lot easier. It's nicer to use whenever I'm doing 3D printing. And in general, I do like it, but I really use it for whenever I'm making 3D printed parts. I'll go into millimeters, and all the parts here that I did make, I measured all those with millimeters, use this guy, and you can get it just right on the money. Not a bunch of guesswork, especially if you're 3D printing. You don't want to wait, you know, 3-4 hours into your print and realize, oh man, I screwed up. I didn't measure this right, or I used a tape measure and did. It's just all done. And the other thing that you can do with these is you get these two right here, if you can see that. So obviously this measurement you can take right here. This other one can measure the inside right there. So there's 3 different ways, basic ways that I know how to measure with these. You know, you got there, you got outside of here, and you got this back part here. These are just amazing. You're killing yourself if you don't have one. So I definitely recommend getting one of these as soon as humanly possible, even if you don't have a CNC. These are nice. Okay, so I've seen a lot of people on the forums having problems with bits sliding out. And there's a good way to prevent this as much as you possibly can. Sometimes these things just kind of crap out. But proper use and proper maintenance of these will go a long way just using these regular routers. I will bring you in here and show you what I'm talking about. So whenever I'm doing a bit change, obviously I've loosen, tighten, I put those two in the previous video, I showed you that. I do use the push button, but not for very much, just until I get it finger tight, a little past that. So I'll loosen. Like that. And most people after this, you know, you just ran this bit hard, they slam another bit right up there. What I would do, and what I've been doing, because I saw someone else recommend this, is not me. Pop these guys out of there. So you have this collet, it's 1/4 inch, this is all the one that comes with unless you purchase more. These parts here, just make sure they're kind of clean, but also, if you see here, you've got these little ridges in here. Make sure that those are all nice and cleaned out, because a lot of that dust can get packed in there, and when you tighten it down, say it only gotten one, it'll kink all the other ones and make your bit go wobbly, or just overall decrease the effectiveness of this clamping load. So what I like to do is take this guy out, inspect it, every bit change, especially long bit. You know, if you're doing something really, really small, fast, you may not have to, but it's just good practice. Take that out, grab an air duster real quick. Don't turn it upside down because that will cause a freezing spray. This is not compressed air. None of these are that I know of. This is actually, I mean, you can create a freeze spray. You don't really want to do that, especially if this guy's kind of warm. Keep your can upright, face it up there. Just a couple squirts. That will get it nice and cleaned out. Feel up there, make sure there's nothing packed in. Replace, put your bit back in, you're good to go. Keeping that clean will save you a lot of heartache. Okay, on to the next tip. There's a lot of people complaining about their Z in general, saying, oh, did my bit slip? And one thing that I would say to do is while it's running, if you're seeing that happen, let me bring this down a little bit. You know, it's gonna be really, really hard to see your bit move 1/8 of an inch down there, especially if it's slipping. You know, there's so much action going on down there. Really easy to watch is while it's running. Watch this guy. You see this big old red and then chrome offsets here. So you got the red and the metal. That's really, really easy to see. Even if I put it on its slowest setting, you can still see it. See it moving right there? That's a very good indicator. So if it should be flat and you're seeing that move, maybe then you do have some noise in your cable. Maybe you do have a bad connection. Who knows what? Now you know what to chase down. If you see this staying completely straight, but you're still getting divots while it's running, your bit's loose, you need to stop immediately. Either way, something's not happening right in your program, so you should probably stop anyways. But that'd be a really good thing to look at, is to watch that if you start seeing that happen. For the next quick tip, I've seen them kind of wear out pretty quick, is with these magnetic part of the probes that go on your collet over here. They're getting really pissed about the wire and it breaking off of there. If it does break off, you can solder onto there. You just have to be very, very quick, because if you heat up that magnet, it'll lose magnetism. Found out the hard way when I installed the magnets on this guys. I put magnets here and I actually sunk them in with a soldering iron, and then couldn't figure out why the hell they weren't very magnetized anymore. Whenever you get these, what I would recommend is just immediately going and getting some epoxy and then just potting it in, just putting a little epoxy around there, and it gives you a bit of a strain relief and you're not exercising right where it was soldered at. If you do that, it's pretty brittle because it's soaked up the solder and it'll work harden. So that is what I did, and I haven't had any problems since, and it works out pretty nice. And whenever I store mine, put that there, and instead of storing it at some crazy angle, keep it like that, and it stays fine. And then whenever you do pull this thing off of the router, don't yank it by the cable, and especially don't start your router, but grab it right here, pull back. You don't need to put any more strain on this cable that you don't want. For the next tip, my router, I thought it was different. I thought that everyone else just didn't maintain theirs, or they got a bad one or something else, who knows what. I was just like, man, I've never had that problem, but I saw a lot that people were having the problems with this guy just moving and dancing around on him. And every time I went to move mine, man, that was difficult to move. I was like, yeah, right, that ain't moving. Halfway through a cut, Found out it does definitely move. All of a sudden I heard the motor just bog on down, like a semi going up a mountain. I had to finish the rest of the cut, kind of just hold my hand right here, dancing along with it. I don't recommend it. It was not fun. What I saw from another person, if I knew their name, I'd give them credit, but they're the ones that came up with it. It was not me. Just a simple little toothpick, and you can stick it right between here and here. Like, you're not angling like this, you're not angling like this, you're just trying to slip right by. And it seems to hold. I mean, you're not trying to send it home, you're just trying to get it wedged in just enough. Do this at your own risk. This is all up to you, but that's worked great for me. There is a Thingiverse file that somebody created where it has a little plastic bracket. I didn't get mine to print out that well, and I figured, you know what, this thing's been working, so I'm not gonna screw around with it, but it clips right here and flips over. But I only really ever change these. Usually I'm running at 3 almost all the time, unless it's a V-bit. I'm up to around 6, 5.5 or 6. So usually I'm just there. I only usually move twice. And steps, you know what, with this machine you got a phenomenal start. You have stuff that you will not have to replace with all this metal, these linear bearings, these ball screws, everything else. The one part which I guess they've had tons of problems with, I have yet to have problems with them, but I'm pretty good at checking them, is these little connectors. And especially, you know, like this one here, if I didn't have this drag chain on there and a strain relief, that would get a lot of wiggle back and forth, which I know these connectors do not like. As far as this one, it's stationary, but some of these connectors just do not like getting moved around, and they seem like a weaker link. As far as where they're connected in there, and right over here, I got a hot glue gun and put a dab on either side. It's not permanent, it's not as good as putting epoxy or something like that down, but if I need to reset it or move it around or swap out my cables, because I've been swapping them out for a lot of flexible cable, which I'm going to go over in a future video, it makes it so it's easier to remove. Epoxy makes it a lot more difficult, and the hot glue works well enough for me. So that would be a tip I'd say, is if you want, put a dab of hot glue, and that'll take up some slop from those wanting to move. But once you get that, you should be fine. You shouldn't have to worry about anything. For the next tip, there is a thing called max jerk on your machine. With your machine, the way max jerk is defined, it's the time rate of change of acceleration. So basically moving from one tool path to another, or how much it's got to slow down at the end before it has to stop or change paths or anything like that. If you increase your max jerk, you know, with other consumer grade CNCs, you need to keep the max jerk pretty low because they're not as rigid. With this machine, it is much more rigid, but they keep it at a very conservative number, which is nice, especially when you're starting out. It gives you a lot of grace, but once you get into bigger carves, that stuff really starts adding up. So whenever you get it, the max jerk is set up to be 1,000. Right here on motor 0, my max jerk is 10,000. I have upped it. I've heard people go up to around 12,000, 15,000, but I've heard from most people it is safe to go, and this is in metric. Look over here at the units. This is in metric. These units here is in the 10,000 range. I'm not going to tell you to do it or not to do it. This is all entirely up to you, but this will increase your speed between all your different parts moving around. So yeah, 10,000 there on motor 1, motor 2, the same, and then motor 3, 10,000. But if you change your max jerk settings, you'll be able to fly around a bit quicker and get your carves done a lot quicker. This basically limits the machine based on rigidity, and I mean, we're still in a consumer grade machine, although I would say this is top of the line consumer grade, so it's not extremely high, but I know the max jerk settings are set really high for say commercial machines, but that'll help you there. Okay, so for this part, this is about saving your X and Y zeros for your material, not for your homing. If you don't know the difference between homing and material zeros, please watch my previous tips and tricks videos. I go over it pretty in depth. I'm not going to do that here, just be wasting a bunch of time. Anyways, with your material, we're going to set this up and act as if this is our material. And get close. So in this file that we're doing make-believe, I'm going to set it up as in it was the bottom left corner, which we're pretty close to it there. So I'll leave that alone. Now with this here, your X and Y, I usually never use the probe for anything besides Z, so I'll set my X and Y, press that guy there, that guy there. Now you got your zeros, and since I already did home the machine, you can see what the offsets are for it. Z, we'll just set this as a Z, we don't really care too much about that. See 10.008, 6.063. If you write these numbers down, and assuming that your machine homes the same exact way, you can move back to these exact coordinates. And I wouldn't trust the Z, I would usually take my Z again with the probe. But you can move back to these exact coordinates and then press material 0 and start your file again. You should be good. What I would do, say your machine lost its brains, turned off, I don't know, file went corrupt, something else, I would home the machine and then manually move. There are G-code commands you can use, but I just manually move as close as you can to these points. And I mean, when you get it dialed in, you can get there. I can get right on the money. G-code commands will get you there quicker. So learn your G-code. You can enter that in on this screen right here. You can enter in your G-code manually just to move yourself around. But what I would do, take a photo of these before every carve. You know exactly where they are. Then say you did lose everything, so we're going to press that. It's already been done. And it's only saying over because it's looking at another file that I've had in here, which it's not going to fit, but don't worry about the over. I've had a couple times whenever this machine has rehomed that it would bounce a little bit or something weird would happen. I think it's with the temperature and you need to reset the settings for your stall homing. What I've gotten the habit of doing is every time I stall home, I go right to one of these spots. So if you look at the grid here, that is 2 inches, that's 2 inches, and I should be able to go right there. And if I move this machine, so say I just lost everything, right? I just stall homed, and everything looks good, but I want to double check. I'll go to 2 and 2, I'll go right there, or 6 and 4, or whatever it is, and see if I'm right on the money. Or if I want, 7 and 4, so it would be like right in the middle, just get the calipers, cut that in half, make a little line. Make sure that when this bit stops and your readouts over here are reading 7 and 4, that is what it is. If it's off by, a quarter of an inch or whatever, if you do re-enter in those values that we had as offsets before, they're not going to be set right. Say when this thing bounced off of here, it bounced off by, to make it easy, 1 inch, right? And it was only in the Y direction, so 1 inch it thought it was at 0, because when it bounced off, it went off, which it's never been even close to that off. But to make it simple, 1 off. If I watched on my screen before putting in my material 0, and I just moved this guy around and I moved it to, we'll say 7 and 4, and I went right there, it would actually say 7 and 5, and it would be right there. On the board, it would say 7 and 5. On the machine, it would say 7 and 4, because it really started out at 1 inch here. So I use that as a sanity check just to make sure that it is what I hope it is. Then you can use those previous presets that you took a photo of, go to those points, and then press your material zeros, and you should be in good shape. Z, you may have to reprobe. For longer cuts like that, I typically like to probe off of the wasteboard, unless you're going to have a lot of extra material. If your cutting area is really 12 inches, but your material is like 16, and you're going to have 4 inches on the left-hand side, well, then you're always going to have space to put a probe. But if you're not, I think using the bed surface is pretty nice. So take your X and Y from your photo, but as far as your Z goes, I would still run the probe to touch it. Just because this guy up here could have bounced a little bit, just like I was talking about on this other axis over here. So I think the best course of action with that, you don't really care if that bounces off there, you just really care that this is accurate. So take your Z0, but as long as you've done your sanity check, you can use your previous X and Y. Now say if your sanity check fails, right, like I said, being off 1 inch, rehome it and check it. Or do your original 0 from a known point. I'm gonna have a file about that. I've got a new idea for a bracket that would make this whole process a lot easier. And it'll be coming out here soon, hopefully within the next week or so. Okay, so that's all the tips and tricks I had for this video here. Thank you guys a ton for sticking around. It means a ton to me. And then if you can like, share, subscribe, especially the subscribe part. These videos take me hours and hours and hours to make, produce, clip, everything else. If you can just click that little button, I would greatly, greatly appreciate it. So in my next video, I'm hoping to discuss this guy, all the wire management, and then also that bracket I've been talking about. I got a really good idea for that, but it's going to take a video to kind of explain and say why it's useful and why you should try using it. And maybe you can come up with something even better. I like this hive mind we got. If you can leave like comments that are helpful, greatly appreciated. We're all trying to learn here, so become a part of the conversation. But yeah, thanks again. It's been Nick some more with some more woodworking.